welcome to another episode of the Pierce Brothers. Today we're doing another campfire. We're talking about fun guns, like some of our favorite, most fun guns to shoot. And before we get started, make sure to go check out our Patreon and subscribe, all that good stuff. I think we'll just start with Porter again. That's typically what we do and work our way to Dad.
All right, well, here we go.
Yeah, but again, our campfires are kind of a casual setting where we can just sit and talk and discuss, kind of like a podcast. Different topics and that. So if you haven't watched our other campfires, go check those out. There's a lot of great topics we covered in there. So,
Okay.
all right, Port.
From watching all of our videos, I guess you don't really realize, some of you might not realize, I am a Mini 14 fanatic.
No.
No. They're a good gun. They're good for long range. They're good for close range. Take off the scope and shoot it iron-sighted. I don't know. I love the Mini 14. I wish this one was threaded because then I could put on my suppressor. So I'm going to have to beat Dad out of one of his Mini 14s that's threaded.
You're gonna trade me that worn out piece of junk for
No, why not? It's not worn out.
Looks like
it still
works
shoots
great.
750 yards, Dad.
When he was younger and he had that gun first had, he'd be out shooting it, he'd bring it in. I'm like, Porter, that thing's hot enough to cook a steak on.
I empty several mags all at once, but
That's the fun thing about autoloaders. But that's also the downside is you run through ammo so dang quick.
yeah. But anyways, Mini 14 I think is just one of those guns, like, or even an AR-15 or something. You know,
brought an
autoloaders in general
So
are
I'll just
just
mention
fun.
it now. Yeah,
Yeah,
ARs, minis,
Yeah,
but
they're
all
just
fall in that
fun.
same category.
The 223 or 556, they're just cheap to shoot, for the most part. As long as you can find
Speaking of
ammo
that,
cheap enough.
Ammo has come down a lot recently, so now is a good time to buy ammo. If you
Yeah,
can
buy
go
a few
buy
extra
some
1,000
cases.
rounds. The wife can shoot this gun and get along just fine with it. My daughter has shot it a few times, so I mean, it's just, I don't know, it's just fun. Anyways, so that's one of my first guns of choice. If I'm just gonna go up to the hills and just shoot with the family and just have fun, that's always one that's in there.
We just do one each and go down the line.
Sure. Yeah, that way it kind of mixes it up a little more.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
Jake.
For me,
You got into the black powder.
yeah. Black powder's a lot of fun.
And you're gonna shoot it really slow.
Yeah.
It doesn't cost hardly anything to shoot.
Porter and Joe were talking about how it's fun to shoot fast with their autoloaders, and it's really fun to shoot a single shot like this. This one here, I just
If you want to see some real slow black powder footage, go watch our pumpkin carving from Halloween last year. We all finished our pumpkins, and Jake's over there. I'm not done yet. Bam! Reloads for 2 minutes. Bam!
Yep.
I think we have to speed up the video.
Yeah, I did. I did fast. I sped up the footage so it'd go quick. I'll Jake's over there.
And running it in.
Well, it's fun just to take a step back and shoot slow and enjoy the old technology like this. Like this one here is a customized Parker Hale Enfield that's it's customized to basically exactly duplicate a Confederate carbine from the Civil War era, but really fun. It's shoots a big chunk of pure lead. I make my own powder, and it's just enjoyable and cheap to shoot. So, yeah.
Well, at least it's cheap.
Yeah,
At least
yep.
it's cheap.
Yeah. All right. Porter mentioned his mini. We kind of mentioned the AR. I shoot ARs quite a bit. They're just fun, like Porter mentioned, pretty cheap to shoot. You can set them up for longer range or closer distance. Biggest downside, you go through a lot more ammo.
A lot faster.
Yeah, a lot faster. So, you can slow it down, do some training in that, and you slow down your ammo consumption that way and go through a fraction of the amount of ammo. But this is just a PWS upright through on an Anderson loader. Nice budget build for a quality upper. Yeah, PWS right here in Boise, Idaho. They make really great rifles. Porter's got a 6.5 PWS that he took out to 1,060 yards, I think.
1,065.
Yep. Yeah. So pretty cool guns. And ARs are just fun. Blink, shoot. They're simple, easy to operate. But on that note, minis are simpler and easier for those beginner shooters. ARs are a little more complicated, but yeah, both good options for a semi-auto 5.56 caliber gun. So Yeah. All right, Dad.
My turn. Well, if you've ever watched any of our videos, there's probably been some mention of a Colt single action a time or two in there. So, that's still ranks as one of my favorite fun guns, the Colt single action. You know, sometimes I just like to just go shoot something, and that's usually the first gun I reach for, just when I want to step outside my front door, shoot a few rounds. It's usually a Colt single action. I'll tell you a little bit of story here. This, couple of them actually. This gun, by the way, was made in the early 1880s. I joke and I call it my master gun because it's got the black gutta purchase stocks on it, 4 3/4 nickel 45. This gun's completely original, and it's obviously a black powder era gun, so it really should not be shot with smokeless loads. So I actually have an extra cylinder that I fitted to it that's a smokeless cylinder, so I can shoot it that way. This gun is, of course, a single action Army, made about 1900. It's got factory carved steerhead grips, mother of pearl steerhead grips on it, or stocks as they are technically known. Most people don't know them as that, but that's what they are. So, I got to tell you a little bit of a story, though. When I was 13 years old, my dad had a cousin that was coming to visit, and he had never been out to the ranch before, and we were 20-some odd miles out of town, and Dad said, Brian, I'm gonna leave you with Nick, and you know, him and his wife actually rode with my dad and mom, and my stepmom rather, out to the ranch, and I rode with Nick. And he had a big old, you know, early 70s car that was, you know, had the big block in him, and he's pulling a camp trailer behind. And I'm sitting there, here's a guy, you know, he's in his 70s, he's retired. I didn't know anything about him, but I'm trying to make conversation with him. And turns out he was a real shooter and loved guns and had sold most of them, but he still had some. And he had a really early Smith & Wesson 44 Magnum, and he told me about his experience with that. And I said, you ever have any experience with a Colt single action? He goes, yeah. He said, I've got a Frontier 6-shooter in the back. Well, I knew what that was. That was, of course, the name of the 4440. 4440 was the only one to have that name. And he told me the story behind the gun. And the reason I brought this gun today is because it had identical grips that this one does. So the Colt used a variety of steerhead carvings. And the most common one you see on the Pearl was a pretty simplified one because the mother Pearl is very difficult to carve without breaking it. So this gun was a 4 3/4 inch nickel with factory installed, you know, mother Pearl grips on it, stocks on it. And he had it housed in a Mexican drop loop holster and a money belt that had Mexican conchos studded on it throughout. It's a beautifully made rig, and apparently it was issued to the first Arizona Indian policeman, and he carried it about a year, and he got struck by lightning, killed him and his horse. Well, they were very superstitious, his people were, did not want to touch any of the belongings or have anything to do with it. So Nick's, I don't remember if it was a father or whatever, went out and buried the Indian and took his belongings because the Native Americans did not want anything to do with it. And later on, that gun got used in there was a bit of an uprising, and there was a trading post, and a guy says, "Oh, that's a really nice gun you got. Can I see it?" Well, he pulled it out, handed it to him, but like this, and they took and cocked the gun, boom, shot, killed him, and they wound up tracking those outlaws down and dealt with them as they typically did in the West. And so this gun actually had a very rich history to it. But we get to the ranch, and Nick and I'm like, I got to see this gun. It was back in the camp trailer. I'm looking at this thing, and I mean, it was a wonderful gun. I've got slide pictures of that thing somewhere. Back in the 90s, I traveled through Colorado, and when Nick and Madge, his wife, got elderly, they had some help from other family members, and they made sure that family member inherited the gun. Unfortunately, they don't even hardly know what they have. They know it's a significant gun, but they really don't know what they have. And years ago, I was traveling through Colorado, like 30 years ago. I stopped in, I called them first, stopped in and introduced myself and took a few photos of it. But I'll just see if I can't get pictures of those someday. But Nick and I would go. Dad said, Brian, go show Nick around the ranch. So I put him in the old big ranch truck, and we drive around, and I showed him the water holes and the best fishing holes, and of course we ended up shooting a lot of rabbits with that 4440, and he'd come up every year, and next time he started bringing a lot of ammo. And the 4440 is really technically by any measure an obsolete caliber, or it was, meaning that we have much better 44 calibers. Its bottleneck cases are thin, all that, but it's the coolest nostalgic cartridge ever. It's just a ton of fun. And that was one of the first big bore 6 guns I spent a lot of time with. And of course my connection with Western history, I like what's known as early modern firearms, which references the early cartridge guns, and that was a real golden era. And but we'll cover that another day in another video. But again, that's one of the guns I consider one of the funnest there is Colt single action. Everybody should own at least one. So anyway, we'll cover some rifles here in a minute. But back to you, Port.
All right. Well, next up on the list of just fun guns that's cheaper to shoot is honestly any 22, but one of my go-tos just when I'm just wanting to have fun and shoot and plink, and then if my daughter or my wife wants to shoot and plink, is my 1022 here. I'm going to be switching out the barrel to something that's threaded so I can put my suppressor on it and stuff, but 1022s, they're just a lot of fun. They this particular one I can shoot 300 yards pretty easily and shoot clay pigeons at 300 yards with it, and so it works pretty darn good. I really like it. But I should have brought a couple of my other 22 handguns as well, single sixes, and my GSG 1911 22. Just when you go shooting with the family, you throw in 3 or 4 different 22s, and that way you can keep it cheap while everyone's shooting and not break the bank. But yeah, those are always a good go-to for me.
My next one, it's hard to beat a cap and ball revolver, just for fun, just for sheer funness, and it's hard to beat the Colt Dragoon. There's just something about shooting a big, heavy black powder revolver. These things are
so much smoke.
like in
I'm
the movie, the Three the Three Amigos, like they're
seeing my follow-up shots,
duel or whatever, and they take his fancy, pretty nickel-plated Colt and give him I think it was actually a Colt Walker actually in the movie, but they say you want to die with a man's gun, not a little sissy gun like this.
He throws his single action in the dirt.
But yeah, I mean the Dragoon, it really is just a big, heavy gun, and
it's a man's gun.
Shooting it with 50 grains of black powder is a lot of fun. So,
and it's so heavy it doesn't hardly recoil.
Yeah, well, that brings up another point. Again, showing my bear gun. This gun's kind of torn apart right now. We're working on the cylinder and then going to be sending the barrel off to have the sight soldered in place. But this one was converted to 45 Colt by Yoon's Gunworks, and shooting heavier 45 Colt loads in this, like you don't even. It's such a heavy gun. You're just makes heavier loads just really
easy to shoot.
Mild. Yeah, it feels really mild. So yeah, the Dragoon in particular is just a fun gun to shoot. I need to get a Colt Walker or a pair of Walkers and do my Josie Wales impression.
Yeah, and the thing about those two, of course, there's a ton of different cap and ball type revolvers, but they're pretty modestly priced. I've always been absolutely amazed at how inexpensively, Uberti and Pieta and whoever else, currently makes those. Most of these are imports from Italy, but they're for the price of those guns. I would hate to think about making that gun for the price that they charge for it. They're like a serious bargain, and so that's food for thought on them. I mean, they're not mainstream cartridge gun that everybody wants, but man, they're a lot of fun. They really are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. My turn. No. I brought my STG 44, the 22 long rifle, modern made version. We featured this in our firing line a couple weeks ago, or a month-ish ago. Super fun gun to shoot. It's a 22 caliber long rifle, really reliable. I mean, we had 1 or 2 malfunctions there at the range, but
Probably
one was a misfire, and then
Yeah.
one was because I overloaded the mag.
Yeah. Anyways, but yeah, I mean, we've shot, that's 3 total malfunctions out of probably almost 1,000 rounds through it. And just really, really reliable for a 22. No recoil because it's so heavy. And you can just sit there and shoot right on target every shot, you know, rapid fire. And cheap to shoot, you know, like Porter
22.
mentioned, 22, yeah. Only downside is it's a little heavy for the kids unless you get it on a bench rest or something. But yeah, that's a great option, and they're about $400, you know, street price. So pretty affordable for a cool piece of history. The original STG-44 was designed during World War II. It translates, it's a Sturmgewehr, translates to storm or assault rifle. It was the first really assault machine gun, and it was designed by the Germans during World War II. So
It was interesting story about that. I actually used to own an original one that was converted semi-auto only, but the original ones in that caliber are also extremely soft shooting, like probably even softer shooting than an AR on full auto
Yeah.
and stuff. But
chamber
8mm Kurtz. So it's
yeah.
a shorter, generally a 123 grain bullet going like 2,000 feet a second, somewhere in that ballpark, 2,300, somewhere in there. So, but Hitler's actually the one that came up with that name, Sturmgewehr. When the German engineers first approached him because wartime Germany was a very weird system, the way he had things set up, and he very much controlled, you know, what got produced and who got what type of weapons and whatnot. And the Germans engineers approached him about this new rifle to replace the K98 Mauser rifle, and based on the combat experiences of the Germans, especially on the Eastern Front, those combat took place within 100 meters, and they wanted something to offset
faster firepower.
yeah, and they wanted something to offset the numerical superiority of the Russians, and trying to do that with the full action rifle just wasn't working. So they came up with this new rifle design, and Hitler didn't like the idea. But they went ahead with the project anyway, and they originally named it the MP-44, kind of like the machine pistol, like a submachine gun, is what they were trying to like hide the program under. And then Hitler went and visited the Eastern Front, and then everybody's got these new rifles, and then he sees demonstrations like, oh, well, we're going to call that the Sturmgewehr, and he liked the rifle at that point, you know, so that's where the name came from, was Hitler.
Yeah.
What year was that?
1944, I think. 44.
What year?
1944.
44. Towards
Yeah.
the end of the war.
Yeah. The
Worst
original
man in
gun.
history, Hitler, yeah.
Yeah, the original gun was first introduced in 1943 as kind of like prototype versions. They came up with the kind of finalized, mass-produced version, and they called that the MP-44. And then, of course, Hitler saw it and was like, "Oh, that's actually pretty cool. Let's call it the Sturmgewehr."
Yeah.
Interpreted
Yeah.
to mean what?
Basically, like the German word for assault rifle.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And then, of course, they were used in Star Wars.
Yeah.
Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi as the Rebels blasters. The Battle of Hoth and the snow battle at the beginning versus
Yeah.
the AT-ATs. And then in Endor with all the Ewoks, little teddy bears, as people call them. Yeah. The Rebel troopers were carrying their STG-44s. Of course, they modified them a little bit and had a scope on top and a different stock. But yeah, it was in just modified STG-44s. So kind of cool because I'm a nerd and I like history a little bit. So and I love Star Wars. So
And I love Star Wars.
yeah. But yeah, fun to shoot, cheap to shoot, and neat piece of history.
It started the whole assault rifle craze that Joe loves.
Yeah, whatever.
AKs and
AKs and AR-15s. Yep. I had to pick all the tactical stuff because I knew Dad and Jake would bring all the revolvers and lever
Antiquated
actions.
stuff.
Yeah, all the old cool
The old
stuff. Yeah, so I had to offset a little bit of the old guy stuff with some of the new guy stuff.
Well, and I was in the same boat. I thought, I should bring something like an AR, but I thought, no, Porter and Joe brings
That's the neat thing about us. We all kind of have our interests, and between us, we cover about every category of shooter out there. So.
Oh, well, I guess
right,
my
Dad, what
turn.
do you got?
Yep.
So, this is a Uberti model 1866, chambered in 44 special, actually. This thing is incredibly accurate, very good rifle. But here's one I was going to make. I was going to bring a 92 Winchester 4440 and even a Marlin lever gun and that. But one thing I was going to make the point of is that sometimes we get together with my sons' wives, and we just shoot. And don't take this wrong, because bench testing has its place. It really does. It's important. But sometimes you just want to shoot. And one thing I noticed was that I would throw in a bunch of lever guns, typically in 357 or 45 Colt, and that's what the ladies always shot. I mean, they'd grab them and go through the box ammo by the case, if you will, blazing just offhand, tin cans, just casually shooting. And these old lever guns are tons of fun to shoot. And of course, they work very well with cast bullets. Hand loading's probably important, because you can shoot in volume and not break the bank doing it. But the Ubertia, my hat's off to them for making such a great rifle at a modest cost. They've been building these since about 1973 or 74. And in fact, I bought my first one in sometime between late 75 and early 76. And I've had shot dozens and dozens of them since then. Used them in 357, 45 Colt, 4440. But one thing I've noticed too is that the stock drop with these doesn't fit a lot of people as well. The ladies instantly notice that they have to, they run it, they kind of raise their head a little bit to line up with the sights. And that's where a lever gun like a 92 Winchester or a Marlin 1894 or some, they had better stock dimensions from that standpoint. They fit people better. And so, but either way, these are incredibly fun guns to shoot. They're handsome to look at. Something else that I should note is I love the old Sharps rifle. Again, this is an early modern firearm. This is a Shiloh Sharps model 1874 side hammer, special order wood. Of course, got the hang-mounted aperture sight. Pewter silver forearm, still has the stand-up backhorn sight as well. Heavy barrel. These guns are incredibly accurate, and if you've ever shot these, you'll quickly realize what a remarkable gun these were. These were a true legend on the frontier because they were accurate so far out. In fact, there's a lot of modern shooters that take these and they do the Billy Dixon shot, which that's a pretty famous shot where a guy used one of these in 50 caliber. Billy Dixon did to stop a warrior at Adobe Walls at the standoff there.
Wasn't that like 1,100 yards or something like that?
Yeah, I don't remember the exact yards now, but it was a long shot. I was thinking it was more like 1,500 something.
Maybe, yeah.
One of you guys, smart guys, could use your phone and look it up. But anyway, it was a long shot. And so there's people that recreate that shot today, like as informal events. Of course, there's 1,000-yard competitions with them. There's the Quigley shoot. I think they call it the bucket thing. I don't know. I've never been to those, but I know what these guns are capable of, and they're really remarkable guns. Shiloh and both C-Sharps, who used to be in business together, and they separated, are both built in Montana. They're both very, very good quality. I don't have issues with either one of them. Another, for somebody that wants to try one and doesn't want to spend what one of these has cost, they do well to look really hard at the Pedersoli. They're a very good line for the money. Uberti's also making them now. And I haven't tested one of those, but I would expect it to be a quality gun that shoots well. But those are good entry-level guns. In fact, those guns do very well in competition, believe it or not. So anyway, but these are guns that will slow down your shooting compared to an AR or whatever.
They just cost a little more per round.
Yeah. Well, they got set triggers where that front trigger is super light, and but they're great guns. They're a piece of history. Of course, these were known in the day as the Buffalo rifle. Many of them that were made back in the day went to the frontier for buffalo hunters, hide hunters. That was kind of a sad chapter in American history when you really see what went on there. But it showed the power and accuracy that these guns had to offer. They were also used in the military by a lot of the scouts and so on. But yeah, they're remarkable rifles and tons of fun. So Anyway, there's a couple fun guns I've thrown in the mix too. So
Court, you got any more?
No, I just brought 2.
Okay, Jake, what do you got?
So if you're gonna be shooting a semi-auto pistol, it's hard to beat a well-tuned 1911 for
It
just
is.
for funness and
And
this one-
classiness.
yeah. This one's my Alchemy Classic Government model. Quickly becoming one of my favorite shooting 1911s. Really accurate. They got a really good trigger pull, good sights, they're easy to shoot and hit with. They're just a lot of fun. One other gun I would throw in, kind of as a pair with this, would be a Thompson submachine gun, a Chicago typewriter.
Yeah, a Chicago typewriter.
The Annihilator. I've shown a few.
Captain Ball guns.
Yeah. Jake went from
muzzle loaders
yeah,
to
muzzle loaders to
Thompson submachine guns.
1920s gangster.
But yeah, I've shot a few full auto Thompsons, and that's probably the one gun that's the funnest gun I've ever shot. They're just very controllable.
And
Of
just
course,
cool.
45
They're
ACP.
so cool,
They're
yeah.
classy looking. They're just fun. I've got a couple of semi-autos. I've got, I don't even know, 6,000 or 7,000 rounds through them now, and once you tune up on the new semi-auto guns, they can be a pretty reliable shooter. And they're actually, in some ways, probably funner than the full auto gun. I know that's probably blasphemy to some of you guys, but they fire from a closed bolt to make them legal, and you can take them out to further distances than you could with an open bolt gun and hit targets, you know. So they're funner from that standpoint. If you're just wanting to go out and blaze through ammo, nothing beats the full auto gun. So
Yeah, and that Thompson is so heavy. I've shot him full.
Uh-huh.
Kent Lamont had one. I was shooting with him one time, and he dragged that thing out, and he said, "Here, Brian, I got plenty of ammo," and it's all castable loads. So he didn't want to wear out his barrel, you know.
Uh-huh.
So we, well, by the way, those that may not be familiar, cast bullets offer very minimal wear as opposed to jacketed bullets. It's literally 1/50th. So in other words, every round of jacketed, you can put 50 cast bullets through with similar wear. That's why 22 long rifles, literally with soft steel barrels, will still shoot 100,000 rounds without being worn out or before they really begin to wear. But anyway, it's kind of the same thing. But anyway, we went out and shot that thing, and it just sits there. I mean, it doesn't rise, and you're not fighting recoil or anything. It just and it spits them out. They are really fun.
yeah. I knew a guy. I actually knew a vet that fought in World War II that carried one of those. He actually was a paratrooper and fought in D-Day through the Battle of the Bulge and stuff. And he said there was not another gun on the planet that he would have rather have had in those combat situations that he was taking place in than the Thompson. And yeah, and they're just fun. They really are.
I think too, Jake. They some of those units, they would have like one or two of those along the BAR,
Yeah.
and then everybody else would have 1903 Springfields, whatever, and so they kind of had a blend of weaponry that could work for all situations.
Yeah.
And
Just like modern day, just different guns.
Yeah.
Well, and this guy in particular is a paratrooper. Of course, they were dropping in behind enemy lines, and when he first landed, he told me that he hit the roof of a building and fell off into a pile of into a pig pen full of pig shit, is what he said. But when you're jumping in behind enemy lines, having a gun that's fairly compact and has a high rate of fire, especially when you don't know if you're landing among the enemy or with your friends or whoever, it's he thought that was the best weapon in the world for that type of combat situation, you know. But
boy, no kid, especially
Yeah.
when you're outnumbered and
Yeah. So, but yeah, that's all I've got, Joe.
All right, I'll wrap up with my semi-auto handguns. So I brought two of them out here. I've got my, everybody knows I love my concealed carry guns. So I've got my P365 Fuse here. That's the largest variant of the 365. It's not a 320, so you're not going to blow your leg off.
You mean your dick?
elaborate on
Gonna be the SIG guy, be like, it ends today. Yeah, there.
you better elaborate on that, Joe. Explain what you're talking about.
The 320 is got a pretty bad reputation now for going off without any kind of trigger pull, and
Goes off in the holster.
goes off in the holster with nobody touching it, and then detonations in the magazine, all kinds of weird stuff with those. And Sig came out with a social media post here
Like a
This
week
was
ago.
a week ago for
Yeah.
us, but by the time this video goes, it'll be a couple months. And they said, it ends today, and here's all the facts about it, and blah, blah, blah. And, they posted another thing following Monday or Tuesday. Here's the court cases that we've rebutted, and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, but they've still paid millions in lawsuits. And there were issues, 2017-ish.
Oh,
there were
there was.
definitely issues.
There's plenty of videos on YouTube of, like there's one of a cop, these cops arresting a guy and
his gun just goes off. He hadn't pulled his gun out,
Yeah.
nothing. It was just in his holster, and it went off.
yeah, but there's been
But there's
plenty of
lots
those
of
videos.
those. Yeah.
A lot of some of the major police departments adopted right off because they've
Yeah.
been military tested and approved. They thought, hey, this gun's good to go. They adopted it, and it didn't take them too long to ditch it.
Yep.
And the
back
bad
to
part
the
is
clock.
the military told them they needed to redesign that trigger as part of the agreement, but they took the old triggers and put in the civilian guns, and that
Yep.
was the problem.
That was the problem. And then they had a P320 upgrade recall. It wasn't a recall,
Yeah.
it was a voluntary upgrade that they were offering, and that's really what it was fixing those fire control units. So they won't admit that, and their social media is still pretty adamant. But there were, the internet does not believe. But I mean, I've owned 3 P320s, I think. I never had an issue, but I don't know if I had one from those years or not. So anyways, the 365 has not had those issues, but this one is the largest P365 variant. It's easy to shoot because of how big it is. It's got a 4.3-inch barrel, I think, so it's almost a full-size barrel length, as far as a striker-fired gun goes. 17-round magazines, so you get full-size capacity in a more compact gun than for concealed carry, but it's very shootable, fun to shoot. And then another one that I like a lot is my Smith & Wesson M&P Metal. This has an aluminum frame, so it's a metal gun, a little bit heavier, so it makes recoil really manageable, and it's just fun to shoot. Really reliable. Smith & Wesson M&Ps have been ultra reliable for us. The only one we had a little bit of issue with when it got dirty was the new carry comp version with integrated compensator in the barrel. But this one here, we drug this through the mud a couple times, done a few drop tests or torture tests with optics on it, and it's withheld everything, still functioned great. But having that metal frame makes it really fun to shoot, easy to shoot. So
Jonah's polymer wonders.
yeah, this one's metal. It's not polymer.
They're plastic Tupperware
Yeah,
guns.
my plastic Tupperware gun. Yep, made by Mattel, as Dad always says. Yeah.
All right, there's a joke there. You might as well tell them.
Yeah.
Clear back in the 80s when the Glock first started hitting U.S., I remember stripping one down and handing the frame to a friend, and of course they'd weigh nothing, and I said, it says made by Mattel, and I was just making it up, of course. And the guy looked at it, and he grabs that thing, he started looking really serious.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I got a question, Joe. Your SIG 365.
Uh-huh.
How would you rate that compared to the new Ruger?
The RXM.
Yes, which is a
I don't
Glock
know.
19.
I mean, I love both quite a bit. The RXM I've actually carried more recently, just because that new gun feeling.
Well, I knew that, and that's why I'm asking that because that Ruger's a great gun. I mean,
It
from
is.
what we've seen, it's early.
And for
It's
the
new.
money, I mean, because this gun you're running about $750 price wise, whereas the RXM is about $400, so it's half the price. And so far, I mean, we're almost 1,000 rounds now through mine. Porter's got a few through his.
Yeah, I got a couple hundred rounds.
And yeah, I've been really reliable. The features on that RXM are just amazing. I was gonna bring it, but I didn't. I threw this one on. I haven't worn the 365 for a while. I was feeling lonely sitting in the safe waiting for me to carry it because I've been carrying in that RXM. Shootability wise, the RXM it's same size as the Glock 19. It's interchangeable with Gen 3 Glock 19 parts. Yeah, I like them both a lot. So I don't know if I had to pick two handguns for personal defense, those would probably be them, my 365 and then my Ruger RXM. So
Joe's been carrying a 365 for
since they came out, I
that's
got one
been
of those
several
run.
years.
Yeah.
And they had a little bit of issue with some of the really early ones,
sick
but they were unlocking before
Yes.
before the firing pin had fully released, so it'd break
Yeah.
the tip of that firing pin off.
Yeah.
And you can kind of tell by looking at the primer if your gun has a problem, because it'll have a definite firing pin drag down that primer, because you can kind of tell. Anyway, Joe's had no issues with them. He's loved them. He's carried them.
Yeah,
he's
and
used
I've
them a
owned
lot.
about every model they've made, I think, in the 365.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I love them. That's one of my favorite handguns, just because it is so modular and you can change grip sizes and that without having to buy a new gun.
You need to carry a man's gun.
A man's gun, yeah. Get your three amigos.
You want to die with a man's gun, not a little CC gun like this. Enough! Take the gun, let's go!
Get a pair of walkers and
and
carry those
still
around.
carry those. Appendix carry a Colt Walker. Yeah.
You have to admit it's pretty intimidating.
We ought to make an
Getting
inside.
shot at by a walker.
Yeah.
60 grains.
All
of
the
black
smoke
powder.
goes everywhere. Yeah. No, I honestly do. You know, the RXM is a great gun too. I really love that gun a lot. So, further testing though, I just haven't put enough rounds through it to really. I mean, I'd recommend it just because of the price and how reliable it's been so far. But I really like to get at least over 1,000 for sure rounds through a gun before I really carry it seriously. But I've carried that RXM quite a bit since I got it, and the RXM will be just as modular. They kind of, when Ruger made that, they kind of took SIG's ability to take the fire control unit out and swap grips really easily. They did that along with combining Glock's features in that, but they also made it more feature-rich than a Glock. Took a better gun out of the box than a Glock, and it also has the ability to be very modular in swapping grips. I just swapped the color on mine. You just take out a couple pins and then the takedown pin, and then you pull the whole grip unit or the whole trigger unit out. You put it in your new grip. You put your pins back, and you're ready to go. So, really a neat idea by Ruger doing that. I think it's a really well-made gun. So. Yep. Yeah, very shootable, fun gun to shoot. So those, if I had to pick 3 guns, though, it'd be my 365 Fuse, my M&P metal, and then my RXM, because it kind of cover all the sizes of guns there, and then you kind of have all the versatility covered that you need. So, yep, that's all I've got.
Me too.
Oh, well,
Yeah,
good.
I guess we're
We're wrapping up.
yeah.
What's your favorite guns to shoot? Throw those down in the comments. If we haven't shot them, we'll try to get a hold of them and do some shooting. So,
Yeah, there's a ton we've obviously left off.
Yeah,
I mean, we could make this a pretty long list.
yeah, we've all got a lot of favorite guns. So, yeah, 4 hours later. Yep. But yeah, we appreciate you guys watching. Check out our Patreon and all that, like we said, and then like, share, subscribe, and stay tuned for more fun content. If there are other videos you want to see us do or guns you want to see us review, throw those in the comments as well, and we'll get to those as soon as we can. So, thanks for watching.